Why this book? When I was hired to be a school principal, it was one of the greatest times in my life. I had no leadership experience, had been teaching at a high-poverty city school, and was hired to be the principal of a small, rural suburban school district. We were considered rural because of where we were located in New York State, and we were considered suburban based on the size of our student population. For the first 5 years, it was the best job of my life. But after 2010 through 2011, I realized things were changing rapidly. New York State, like many other states and many countries around the world, experienced increased mandates and accountability. Not only were we required to tie a point scale to each of our teacher observations, but high-stakes tests were tied to teacher evaluation as well. Managing these new levels of accountability was a learning experience. I learned about pressure, political agendas, and what happens when the philosophy of the school leader doesn't always mesh with the philosophy of the district, the state, or the nation. It was in this season that I found my true leadership voice. I was one of 8 principals to write a letter to the state education department to argue that high-stakes testing should never be tied to teacher evaluations. I also published many respectful yet poignant articles on my Finding Common Ground blog for Education Week, focusing on why most of the accountability measures were hurting our schools. I also wrote about my understanding that the accountability measures were a consequence of having school leaders who were not necessarily doing what was best for students. However, I found that we leaders simply did not have the time to focus on instruction and meet the demands of this increased accountability. Add on budget cuts and absorbing the whole population of a 1-classroom per grade level school that was closed, and we were met with a perfect storm. Unfortunately, that is when our administrative team began to fracture. Many of us, and many other leaders around the area, talked about how terrible the changes were behind closed doors, but when I went upstate to speak out about them, I felt as though I was standing alone. Fortunately, I had strong support from administrators in Western New York and Long Island. Leadership isn't about standing behind closed doors, complaining about accountability, and then going to school and making teachers do it. Leadership is about going against the grain and using your voice to speak up about the things that you believe are harmful to learning. If you are against high-stakes testing, say so. If you think high-stakes testing is necessary, then say that. Leadership is about using your voice, even if it means going up against others. It is hard, but it is very, very worth it. This book is about striking a balance between doing the things you have to do and finding a way to do the things you want to do. Instructional leadership is about focusing a little bit of your time as many days as possible on student learning. Not only is it vitally important for students, but teachers deserve a leader who respects them and wants to stand side by side with them. We live in complicated times, and leadership is a challenging but worthwhile calling. I was a better leader because of my teachers and students, even when the going got tough with other leaders around me. As Warren Bennis said many years ago, stand up and be a leader. This book will help you do just that. We often talk about instructional leadership in our educational circles. At universities, in workshops, inspiring keynotes, and through blogs and articles, leaders are told that instructional leadership has an enormous impact on students. In John Hattie's synthesis of meta-analyses, which included more than 400 studies on the topic of leadership, instructional leadership had an effect size of 0.42. That is higher than the hinge point of 0.40, which represents a year's worth of growth for a year's input. The problem is that leaders cannot always find the time to focus on instruction and student learning, and in some cases were never given practical leadership training.